Welcome to The Bump, your source of fact-checking information from the mainstream media to your auntie's Facebook ramblings. I think that was the introduction. Welcome to episode 2. We're a bit more organised this week, I think. Just a tad.
Maybe.
We spent some time organising some stuff. A bit disorganised last week. I think we recorded for 2.5 hours. You can actually hear us as it goes on. You can hear us getting a little bit more and more tired as time goes on. I certainly was starting to get a bit... I had so much dead air to cut out.
I could imagine.
It took me... It was 2 days of editing. It was crazy.
You did good.
I know. It really sounds like we were talking and having a proper conversation rather than
the whole time continuously.
One word at a time that I was doing. Oh, God. It was terrible. All right. So we're going to start with a debriefing. I think this is going to be a regular section where when I'm editing, I hear things that maybe weren't totally accurate or information that I didn't have at the time that I kind of want to bring up. Now, the first thing actually, I kind of didn't really discuss your role, Lucy, well enough. Now, you're a fully productive member of society. You have a full-time job. So you don't really have time to do all of the research that goes into making this show.
Not a lot, no.
No, so basically your role is to question me constantly.
Okay.
And make sure that come up with the questions, information that you think I should have come up with, and that kind of information is also what's going to appear in this little debriefing section that we have here. So I have some information. Most of it is just stuff that I felt that I could have got some more information. So we talked briefly beforehand about sodium potassium pumps, and I found out that the way that a sodium potassium pump works is it pumps 2 sodium atoms outside of the cell. Yep. And 2 potassium atoms into the cell, and that's how you get a charge gradient. So you got 3 out, 2 in. You end up with a charge imbalance, and then...
So what you should have done was drank some potassium chloride in a 3:2 ratio to your bicarb soda.
Oh, God. I'm not even going to go down that. I think if I just eat properly, a good diet, and not drown myself in sodium. Oh, something else I found out was I said that guy died from drinking soy sauce. Yeah. He didn't die. He recovered.
Oh, wow.
But he drank it on a dare, and he ended up going to hospital suffering from acute hyponatremia, and he was quite sick. But soy sauce is actually a common mode of suicide in Japan and China.
Death by soy sauce.
Mm-hmm. I never heard that until I started looking into it. Because I was like, I know people have died from this, and I looked it up, and there were a couple of medical cases that I found.
It's a horrible way to go.
Yeah. Well, now I said that I've got the antacid there, and I thought Simethicone was a filler. It's actually an anti-flatulent.
Oh, nice. Thanks for the graphic.
I won't say whether or not it was successful. It may not have even been a problem. Right, so keep going here. So we have, I mentioned the limit of ionization for UV. So it turns out that the limit of ionization is 10 electron volts. It's usually considered to be the limit of ionization, which is about 123 nanometers wavelength for the UV. Now that's UVC, but UVA and B, which are both longer wavelengths, so lower energy, can still cause cancer. It's not technically ionizing radiation, so I don't know how it works. I was surprised when I read that, so I can't quite explain how that just below that ionizing level can cause cancer. Who knows? But anything below UV radiation, though, is not ionizing radiation. So radio waves, microwaves, not ionizing radiation. Wi-Fi is microwave. Yeah. It's that 2 gigahertz radiation, which is the lower end of microwave. I screwed up a factor known as Avogadro's number, which translates mass into number of atoms. So when I said that the human body contains order of magnitude of about 30 atoms, it's more like 26, 27. Okay. So a number with 26 zeros after it is how many atoms the human body has. Yep. Now, you pointed out one to me that I said that to convert REMs to sieverts, you divide by a factor of 10. It's actually a factor of 100. Yep. So you pointed that out to me. Now, the tritium, I feel I didn't clarify enough that when you have these other radionuclides in the water, like uranium,
Deuterium.
No, not deuterium, but
Oh.
things like uranium, cesium, strontium, and stuff like that.
Yep.
They are contaminants in the water. They're different chemicals that are dissolved in the water,
Yep.
or might even be in there in particulate form. Whereas tritium is different because tritium is actually a radioactive form of hydrogen. It forms part of the water molecule. So this radioactive water, it is actually literally
Water.
just water with a radioactive hydrogen on it. So the water itself is radioactive, and that's why you can't separate the tritium out from the normal water, because it is actually part of the water, and that's why it behaves like water and why it is not really that much of a threat. Now, when I said that the 10,000 becquerels per litre is the World Health Organization for tritium as well, I should clarify that number is specific to tritium.
Yep.
So the safe level varies depending on the properties of the compound. So the safe level for uranium-238, I think it was, is about 1 becquerel per litre.
Okay. Significantly low.
There are some compounds where the safe level is less than 1 becquerel per litre. So 0.1 becquerel per litre for some radionuclides is the acceptable level. So 10,000 is very specific for tritium, and I think that belies basically how relatively safe it is compared to other things, like the ones that they normally worry about, like uranium and plutonium, which I also found out that the half-life of uranium-235, which is the radioactive form of uranium, is 700 million years.
Going to be around for a while.
I don't, and this is just my opinion, I didn't look into this, but I don't think it'll be around Chernobyl for that long, because it'll, between now and 700 million years away, you're going to see shifts, it'll get washed away. There'll be movement of the earth, that kind of thing. It'll be physically moved away from the site. It'll physically migrate away from the site through upheavals and stuff like that. So I don't think it'll be at that site for that long, but wherever it is, it'll be there for the next 700, well, half of it'll be there for the next 700 million years. So, as you said, it's going to be around for quite a while, as opposed to radioactive cesium, which has a half-life of 30 years. I also found out that radioactive cesium has a biological half-life of 70 days. It doesn't really stay in the body for that long. It kind of bioaccumulates, but it doesn't stick around for that long.
Really?
Yeah.
What's this analog to? Potassium.
Yeah, which is something else that I messed up, was that I said that it's 1 below potassium on the periodic table. It's 2. You got rubidium directly below potassium, but it does behave. It is an alkali metal, so it does behave in a very similar way. So it makes sense. It's water soluble, and it gets flushed out by eating potassium and sodium. Still more than tritium, which has a biological half-life of 15 days, which is actually the same. I found out that the biological half-life of uranium is 15 days. So it doesn't stick around for very long, which I was quite surprised, because uranium is always a concern. It's a heavy metal, and its chemical toxicity is actually quite high.
Yep.
So even if you ingest depleted uranium, which is not very radioactive, you were telling me before that they use it in radiation shielding.
Yes.
So you're actually protecting yourself from radiation with depleted uranium. But chemically, it is quite toxic. Plutonium, however, which is another fuel, and that's one of the radionuclides that they're dealing with at Fukushima at the moment, trying to keep that out of the water supply. That has a very long biological half-life. You're talking 197 years, which is a lot longer than a person will be around for.
It'd be in you forever.
It effectively, yeah. There's actually a club during the years that they were developing nuclear energy and nuclear bombs, of people who have accidentally been exposed to plutonium.
Yep.
There was one incident where people had ingested plutonium, but there was a single incident where a guy accidentally stuck himself with a needle containing plutonium.
Oh.
And they're still around. They're all still around. None of them have actually suffered any kind of radiological effects. But they have a club. They call it IPPU or UPPU.
What does that stand for?
IPPU. PU being the symbol for plutonium. Because they can detect plutonium in their urine. because we have instrumentation which is sensitive enough to do that. So they're picking up plutonium in these people's urine. You know, this talking 50 years later, you can still detect it. So they call it IPPU or UPPU. And speaking of half-lives, I also got the half-life of strontium-90, which actually varies. Could be strontium-90 sticks in your bones.
Yep.
And that can stick in your bones from anywhere between 18 and 49 years. Well, that's your biological half-life. So that tends to stick around. And again, that's not something that it bioaccumulates. It's not something that you want in the food supply. It's not something that you want to consume.
Mm.
Again, the whole point of that was to compare that to tritium. Now, Fukushima, I underestimated how much Fukushima has, but not by much. 4.4 million becquerels per litre is the average of the water at Fukushima. So a bit higher than what I said, but still it's a manageable amount and can still be reasonably diluted down to something which can be disposed of fairly safely.
Yep.
So, yeah, I used an old value to work that out. The value I used was an older one where it was only, I can't remember what the level was, but they're now dealing with a total of 3.4 petabecquerels in 770,000 tonnes of water. So that averages out to about 4.4 million becquerels per litre. Now, it turns out that the Nuclear Regulatory Agency for Japan has always had a plan for what they call volume reduction.
Meaning?
Meaning that they've always wanted to dilute the water and release it into the ocean. So 2017 was the year that was supposed to start.
Ah.
But TEPCO have been dragging their heels on it. They don't want to do it.
Yep.
Because they're dealing with enough of a public disaster as it is. But, you know, they're going to have to do it because they've got too much other stuff to deal with.
Yeah. Well, if done properly and responsibly, it's not going to be an issue.
Hmm.
For the case of tritium only, obviously, it's a case-by-case basis for every radionuclide.
Yeah. We could criticize TEPCO for the time leading up to the disaster. They were warned a few times by several groups that their wall was too low, that there was a risk that if there was a tsunami that they could suffer serious damage. There is a nuclear power plant which was much, much closer to the epicenter, which was run by a different company.
Yep.
Which underwent a perfectly normal shutdown and suffered no issues whatsoever. The other plant, which is run by TEPCO, the Fukushima Daini, which is a few miles south of Fukushima Daiichi, had some problems. They nearly suffered a meltdown.
Wow.
So both of the TEPCO plants suffered damage, and one has suffered serious damage. The other one barely escaped a meltdown situation. Whereas another one further south, which was run by a different company, they had higher walls. They had better provisions in place to deal with a situation like that.
Yep.
There are some ways that you could say to criticize TEPCO for. You could say that the accident shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Yeah.
But I would say they've been pretty irresponsible since then in dealing with the situation. They've done a pretty good job of dealing with the situation as best they can.
Mm.
But as I said, we're going to have to make some tough decisions and do some things which we're not going to feel comfortable with. But
when things go wrong is when you learn, right? Because when things go right, that just reinforces bad habits.
yeah, well, nuclear power is something that you do have to treat with respect.
Mm.
And if you don't, this is what happens. And I guess that's the concern.
You have to learn to train the dragon.
Not train the dragon. I think train the trainers. You basically have to make these things idiot-proof.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Just get 2 coffees.
I can get you some instant coffee.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, instant coffee's pretty bad. Patreon. See, this is why I need Patreon, so I can buy Lucy some decent coffee.
You made me sound like a princess.
Well, I mean, I would also like some decent coffee. So if you want me to get decent coffee, if you want me to be able to offer my guests and my co-host decent coffee, then subscribe to Patreon, become a patron, give me some money. It will go to a good cause. Coffee will keep us awake. So I was doing some research over the week.
Yeah.
And I was looking at some videos that I could possibly debunk, going into some of the more weirder medical woo. And I kind of got in a bit of a ranty mood.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
It's a dangerous world going into medical woo.
Oh, it is. It is. It is. And it can frustrate you. So right now I just want to have a quick rant about the myth of the scientific conspiracy. So it seems to be this idea that gets spread around in some of these woo circles, that there's this cabal of scientists who get together and decide what kind of narrative they're going to spin, or that the medical profession is corrupt and there's some kind of information which is being hidden from the people. They're just trying to sell you. They're trying to make you sick and give you cancer or whatever. And being a scientist myself, I've always been a bit wary of flat out denying this, because it would be easy for me to say, being a scientist in my field, to say that. I mean, I could be a part of the conspiracy for all everyone knows. But going over these articles and videos, I can't do it anymore. I've just got to a point where I have to put the niceties aside and say, no, there is no possibility that there could be a large-scale conspiracy ever, period. So for those who aren't part of the scientific industry, it can be easy to imagine that there's this little insulated world of the elites. We always hear these names, these familiar names, these rock stars like Einstein, Fermi, Higgs, all of these people. And it's easy to imagine with this small insular community that there's someone that could be controlling the strings and everybody does their bidding. And especially, there's a problem in the Western world that we sort of suffer from this level of narcissism where we sort of believe the world begins and ends with English-speaking Anglo-Saxons working in the labs run by large corporations. But the fact is that the scientific community is massive. So even if you exclude the routine workers, the ones who aren't involved in research, so they're the people that are making your food is safe, or your medication is within specification, or your car's not going to fall apart and you're going to crash going down the highway at full speed. Even if we just focus on the research community, we're still talking about millions of people. And these are millions of people who conduct their research in all corners of the world, who come from all backgrounds, creeds, and religions. I mean, even I've worked in this small city of 2 million people for 15 years. And even working in my small little community, I've worked with everybody from suit-wearing businessmen to hippies, jocks, geeks, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, capitalists, and communists. People from China to Iran. And one of the most important concepts in science is what we call consensus. This idea of people from all walks of life, all different corners of the world, coming up to the same conclusion by doing the same experiments. So the thing is that science isn't an institution. It's not a club. It's not a way of life. All it is a method. It's a method of finding out information. There are rules on how you obtain information, how you publish information, and how the information is accepted. These rules are in place to make sure that the information that we have is correct, because everyone who comes after you will be using that information to conduct their research. And because of that, we don't like bad information. So when you have people from all different parts of the planets who have different motivations, who might be clear of the usual scapegoats that people like to point their fingers at, like Merck and Monsanto, when all of these people do the same experiments and come to the same conclusions, we know that we're dealing with some pretty solid information. And in the age of the internet, this information is easily accessible by scientists all over the world in an instant. Scientific journal articles are easy to find. Even if you don't have access to the full article, you can even just read the abstract. And once a discovery is made, it's out there. You can't hide it. You can't just bury it. Even if you could put together a small conspiracy, they're going to be found out pretty quickly. Even if the conspiracy is to poison the information, they'll be found out and justice will be swift and brutal, and it has been in the past. See, bad science can be forgiven, and we like to be pretty forgiving of that because we don't want to discourage people from producing studies. So you can be forgiven if you have a poorly designed study or you've made a mistake in your study, wrong conclusions have been made. That can be pretty easily brushed aside if it's just a one-off. And we'll find it out, because when someone tries to repeat the experiment to conduct their research, they won't be able to come to the same conclusion. They won't be able to reproduce your results, and they will ring you up. And I've worked in research groups where we've done this. We've had problems reproducing results. We ring them up and say, "Hey, we're doing this. We're having a bit of trouble here. Can you give us a bit of a rundown on what you did? How can we get to where you were? Because we want to use that information to conduct our own research." But if you're failing to declare potential conflicts of interest, or if you're found to be deliberately manipulating data, you'll be a pariah. You'll be labeled as trouble. Now, there's no official consequences. There's no sort of
science police.
There's no science police. There's no there's not going to be some kind of you're not going to be forced to walk the plank, but you will be virtually tarred and feathered. And once that happens and you're tarred and feathered as a fraud, nobody will want to work with you. No institution is going to touch you, because you've basically been labeled as a person who gives bad information. And controversial data in science is exciting. We don't shy away from things which turn our lives upside down. Something which throws conventional knowledge on its head is exciting. We love that kind of stuff. For example, when quantum mechanics was first discovered, it totally threw everything we knew about physics into total chaos. It was madness. And it did have its doubters at first, because it was just so counterintuitive. But as we did more and more experiments on this stuff, and they were found to be reproducible, then people became more and more accepting of it. And we now live in a world which has been dramatically changed because of what we know about quantum mechanics. I mean, I'm working now on a lot of electronic information. Everything I'm doing here, I have a computer in front of me, a screen, I'm recording on a sound card. Everything I'm doing here relies on silicon transistor technology, which would not be possible if we didn't know about quantum tunneling. So new information, no matter how inconvenient it might be to conventional wisdom, helps us to understand the world better and helps us to make the world a better place. And if you think that someone can just make a discovery and sweep it under the rug, that's another myth. You can't do that. I mean, if you patent something, then the information has to be out there. Either the total details of the patent have to be out there so that people know that they're dealing with something that has been done before. Some stuff can be taken out. Some stuff can be redacted, but at least the general gist of that information is going to be there. You can't just come up with a cure for cancer, patent it, and bury it under the rug. You will have that patent there. Cure for cancer. It'll either have the full details in it, or at least it'll be, here is what the invention is. Contact us for more information. But I mean, secret redacted details on patents are rare. People usually like to have all the information out there, and you have to give special justification for having a redacted patent. And if, say, you make a discovery and you don't patent it, so you discover this amazing thing, and you say, I've discovered free energy. Look, if I say there's going to be a cure for cancer, I may as well say there's going to be free energy, because a cure for cancer is not possible, and free energy isn't either. So, you can cure specific cancers, but you can't cure all cancers. I'm not going to get into that right now, but you can make this discovery and say, well, okay, so I'm not going to patent this. I'm just going to sweep it under the rug. You're basically playing with fate, because no scientist works on their own. There's not one scientist there who's tinkering away in a workshop working on something, or there's not a group of scientists tinkering away in a workshop. Every scientific discovery which is ever made works on previous made discoveries. It was once said, and I can't remember who said it. I mean, people attribute it to Albert Einstein. I don't think it was. But we work on the shoulders of giants.
I think it's Isaac Newton.
It was Newton? Okay.
Maybe it's Galileo. I don't know.
It was someone said it. Someone said it. And it's true, though.
We should say all their names.
But we work on this previous information. All scientific discoveries which are made these days work on these scientific papers which have been published recently. That information is out there. Someone makes a discovery, the information that led them to that discovery is out there. So if you don't publish it, 6 months down the track, someone else is going to discover and publish it. And if you work for a pharmaceutical company which has discovered this amazing drug which is going to cure some disease, and you say, no, I don't want this because we're making a killing off selling the treatment for it, we don't want to cure it, well, then you're going to miss out on that patent. Someone else is going to patent it. This cure is still going to get out there, and your scientists aren't going to get credit for their work. So they're not going to work for you anymore. No one's going to work for you and want to work for you anymore, because it'll come out eventually that you found this and you refuse to publish it. So, yeah, they can do that if they want, but it's not going to work in their favor. And these discoveries will be discovered by someone else because the basic information is there. The information that led them to that discovery is there, and it's easily accessible to anybody in the world who has access to these scientific journals, which is pretty much any academic institution. Now, I'm not saying that you can't buy out the occasional scientist. I mean, there can and have been cases of people that have been bought out, of corruption, of conspiracies. You look at the tobacco industry, there were expert witnesses, and I'm using the inverted commas here, expert witnesses who got up there and stated that the jury is still out on whether or not smoking causes cancer, or that there is not enough evidence that smoking causes cancer, or there was evidence that smoking doesn't cause cancer. These are one or two people that get out there and say these things to try and, because they've been hired by someone who doesn't want to take responsibility for something that they've caused. But that's one or two people. There may be people of influence because they stand in front of a grand jury and say, nope, the evidence isn't there. And they do a lot of hand waving, or they get up in front of the media and try to explain to people the world that global warming isn't an issue. But the fact of the matter is that when you look at the consensus, when you look at what every scientist is saying, then that deception becomes clear. So whenever people say scientists in general are lying, or that there's this big scientific conspiracy, it's just not possible. You can't have this because you're dealing with a broad community of millions of people out there. Hundreds, tens of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people. I don't know. There's a lot of people out there from different walks of life. And to say that every single one of them can be bought out, it would, the larger a conspiracy is, the less likely it is. You can't pay off millions of people to lie. And, that information is freely available. It would be discovered. So, this whole idea that there's a scientific conspiracy that 98% of climate scientists are lying to people, or that medical scientists are lying about vaccines, or that there's no one cure for cancer. It's just not true. And I can't sit by and just let this myth perpetuate. And as I said, it's easy for me to say as a scientist, but it's not about me. It's about things getting in the way of progress. We want to see the world become a better place. We want progress to happen. But for that to happen, some people just need to get out of the way, essentially.
I think a lot of people view the world of science through the lens that they view the rest of the world in. And often it's quite relatable to see how certain organizations are often led by the few. Countries are led by presidents or prime ministers and his inner cabinet of advisors. Empires are run by kings. Big corporations are run by CEOs. But the thing that's different about the scientific community is that there is no one governing it. There is no organization, there is no CEO, there is no leaders as such in the field that determine where the next research direction is going to be. Every scientist has the ability to design their own experiments and do what they want. And it's quite an anarchy type situation where when you have enough people doing what they want and you can't control them and all they do is report on facts, I think often it's difficult for people to understand or comprehend the complexities of the nature of the research or the science or the medical treatments and drugs and how they all work. So it's a lot easier to simplify things into and condense into things that they understand, like turmeric will cure cancer. Just one simple ingredient. It seems easier to grasp.
Well, I mean, taking that example of curing cancer, to understand why that would be wrong, you really need a fundamental understanding of how cancer works, and that involves a lot of biology, knowing about things like cell differentiation.
And it's too hard. People like to go down the path of least resistance. They like to think in the laziest way. It's like that book, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. There's cognitive bias in decision-making based on how difficult we have to think, and often we make decisions on what is the easiest conclusion to come to.
It's very easy to think that, you know, cancer is one disease because we call it cancer, but it's not. There are thousands of different types of cancers out there, and the cancer is often specific to the cell from which it originates. So it is unlikely. I couldn't say never. The scientist thing, you can't ever say never. But it's very, very unlikely that there will ever be a cure for cancer, because cancer is not just one disease. Mm-hmm. It's a collection of diseases that have one thing in common, and that thing that they have in common is uncontrolled cell proliferation. But apart from that, the treatment that you get needs to be specific to the cancer that you have. There are some promising technologies out there that could be used as a common treatment. But even then, that treatment would need to be tailor designed for the specific type of cancer. I mean, if you want to take the nanobots, for example, the nanobots would only be a drug delivery system. You would still need a specific drug for the type of cancer that you're trying to treat. Mm. But yeah, we're getting a bit off track with that. But basically, as you said, it's this idea that rather than looking at the complexities of it, it's easy to say, oh, well, this one thing will cure all of your cancers. Mm. It is, you know, people do want to believe that. And what you were saying before, I think, really rings true about we look at a world which is run by kings. It's run by hierarchies. Mm. And in the past, those hierarchies controlled the flow of information.
Yes.
So it didn't matter so much if the scientist thought something. If they wanted to interject some information or stop the information from getting from the scientist to
the masses,
it was a lot easier in those days. Whereas these days, I mean, we're here doing a podcast. We're sitting in my lounge room recording this podcast, which is going to get out there and be heard by
anyone who has access to the internet.
Possibly. Singles and singles of people. 7 or odd people are going to hear this. But we can get the information out there. Anyone has access to disseminate information these days. I mean, it has its downsides because there is so much junk information out there now. It kind of becomes hard to tell what is and what isn't. But there is still that opportunity to get that information out there directly to the people. Mm. The governments, the corporations can no longer control the flow of information.
No.
So they've lost that control. And as you said, scientists, it's an open source community.
Yeah.
Very much an open source community. We do what we want, effectively. We're constrained by budgets. Science is expensive, but we kind of have minds of our own. We're not.
Journals are more expensive.
Yeah. Well, are you talking about publishing or?
No, I'm talking about accessing journals if you're not part of the institution.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the largest downfall with it is it all seems like a great big kept secret. All this research that is done, all the results are published, and a few publishing houses keep this information and charge exorbitant fees to access it.
Yeah, but the reason for that, though, is they have to cover the cost of the peer review process. And
peer review process doesn't cost anything.
Oh, yeah. Doesn't. Well, I don't know why they do it.
To cover the cost of the publishing house and to make profit.
They should reduce the cost, though, because physical publications are becoming rarer these days. Yeah, maybe they should be cheaper, but you can still for free get access to the abstracts, and you can get a lot of information from those abstracts.
It's contaminated. You don't even know what that word means. It's not contaminated. It's just tap water poured in his bowl. tastes funny.
It does not. Besides, he licks his butt every day. I don't think he'll mind.
What is the latest article you found this week?
Oh, so actually, it was one that you sent me a while ago.
Oh, yeah?
So you sent me this article, which was looking at, it was trying to warn you about.
Not buying any more Lindt chocolate because it contains lead and cadmium.
Was it just Lindt that they were talking about in this article?
Open it up. Lindt chocolate, 85% cocoa. 17 chocolate brands whose products contain heavy metals, lead and cadmium. So they didn't directly say only Lindt, but, you know.
But there's a picture of Lindt chocolate there. But I mean, I would look at that and I wouldn't assume automatically that they're talking about Lindt. I would just say, well, there's chocolate. You know, in general, there's some chocolate. I would have just thought it might have been a stock photo that they took of chocolate. Oh, we have a pop-up. Healthy Holistic Living. Get rid of you.
You should sign up.
God. I'd lose my mind.
You'd get content.
I'm pretty sure I would.
Trader's Joe, Hershey's, Green and Blacks, Lindt, Whole Foods, Kroger, Godiva, Sea Candies, Mars, Theo Chocolate, Equal Exchange, Earth Circle Organics, and more failed to warn about lead and cadmium in their chocolate products.
Yeah. Now, you sent me this. Mm-hmm. So tell me, what was your initial impression?
My initial impression was, oh my goodness, I should never buy Lindt chocolate again.
So you actually believed it?
Well, it's kind of like the natural reaction to this is whether it's true or not. Wouldn't you rather be safe rather than sorry? And do I need chocolate for my bare survival? Not really. So I can live without it. So perhaps I can buy something else.
Buy a brand which isn't mentioned on there.
Yeah. So even though people may or may not fact check any of these, it could potentially affect behavior, belief.
So what made you bring it up as a potential story?
I wanted to know the story behind it. Is it true? Is there actually levels of lead and cadmium? And is it even significant?
So I saw this and my first impression was this is scaremongering. Particularly, they've mentioned names and, first of all, look at the site. There are ads all over it, which is never a good sign. And, you know, that they're mentioning chocolate names. I thought maybe there might be some kind of buy this organic chocolate instead that we're selling. You'll often find that kind of thing on these sorts of sites. Buy this chocolate or buy this detox. You know, there's lead in your chocolate. Buy this organic fruit juice detox, which is going to flush the lead out from your system. But no, that there wasn't actually anything in there. But the wording is sensationalist, though. So, yeah, they're saying, as You Sow has filed legal notices against chocolate manufacturers, including, and you just read the list out, for failure to warn of lead and or cadmium in their chocolate products. So they actually reference a different article here from a different site, which I have looked at, and their wording on that side is a little less doom and gloom, but they still are talking about singling out these products for failure to warn of lead and cadmium in their products. So I did look into this.
There's a lot more companies on this.
There are, yeah, and they've also got some companies which they've greenlit. So I did.
Cadbury's is on here.
I did some research into this, and I was actually surprised. There is quite a bit of truth in it. So it turns out that chocolate has long been known as a food product which has a particularly high level of heavy metals in it, particularly lead and cadmium. These are things which they've been looking at for a while now.
So they all have it? So it's not a big deal?
Yeah. So there is a bit of a story behind this. Now, everyone knows that lead and cadmium are bad. These are heavy metals, and as they say, there's no safe level of lead. But we can't really avoid lead. It's naturally in the environment, and up until fairly recently, there were fairly high what they call anthropogenic sources of lead. So anthropogenic means from human activity. So we had lead in our petrol. We had lead pipes in our water. We had lead paint. There's been a lot of lead spread around by human activity, and we consume it through our food. We consume it, we inhale it, gets everywhere. And turns out that chocolate, or the husk of the chocolate bean, is actually really, really good at soaking up lead.
From the ground?
From the environment.
Yeah.
They've done experiments where they actually used it as like a mop, so put it in a solution to see how much soaks into it. And it does actually soak up lead from the environment.
Oh.
Now, that's just the husk. The bean itself is actually fairly low in lead and cadmium. So the questions become, how does that lead get into the chocolate? And to be honest, we don't know. They've done studies. They looked at isotopic ratio analysis on the lead.
Yep.
Which they can actually use to determine where the lead came from, because they say that the lead in the petrol came from a source. It has a certain isotopic ratio. And the data which they found was actually fairly inconsistent. They couldn't actually they couldn't nail down a solid source of the lead. I have heard it suggested, but by a certain person whose last name resembles a wild canine, suggested that this lead comes from the potassium carbonate that they use to process the lead. Oh, sorry.
Potassium.
They use potassium carbonate to process the chocolate.
Yeah.
It's part of the manufacturing process for the chocolate.
And lead is produced. What is this, alchemy?
No, his claim is that it contaminates the potassium carbonate that they use to process the chocolate.
Ah.
But I've worked in the food industry.
Yep.
And I can tell you that they are very paranoid about those sorts of heavy metal contaminants in the food, or any sort of toxic contaminants in the food. Now, I once did an analysis. I mentioned last week how I used to do trace organic analysis in food products.
Yes.
And I found a pesticide in a food product once that was above the acceptable level, which is typical for the food. But the customer that I was analysing the food for only uses that particular ingredient for a soup product, and they use a very, very, very tiny amount of it. So we gave them the results, and they got back to us and they said, "Can you do the calculations for it? We're trying to work out if we want to use this." Now, it was a pesticide which is not very toxic, but it still was above I think it was 4 times the level, which is usually considered acceptable. So I did the maths on it, and I found out that you would need to eat, I think it was 55 kilograms a day of the raw soup powder.
Yeah.
To be exposed to an unacceptable level of this product. Now, that's the acceptable daily intake, which is 1/100th of what's called the no observable effect limit.
Right.
So the acceptable limit is 1/100th of what they have scientifically determined you start to see symptoms of poisoning. So they take that level, they reduce that by 100, and they say this is your acceptable daily intake.
Yep.
So to reach the acceptable daily intake of this stuff, they would have to eat 55 kilograms of the raw powder, the raw soup powder from the finished product.
So about like 100 litres of soup.
Yeah, or more a day. That's daily. That's not just, you get that is daily intake.
Wow.
And you would have to multiply that by 100 before you started seeing symptoms of poisoning. Now, I don't know. I can't remember if they accepted this or not in the end. They're only a customer. I was sort of out of the loop by that stage. But I do know that there was a lot of umming and ahhing as to whether or not they still wanted to accept the product or send it back to the manufacturer. So the food industry is very paranoid about getting any kind of raw product which is shown to have high levels of contaminants. So I find it very unlikely that they would accept potassium carbonate, which would have high levels of lead, and for that to be the source of the lead and cadmium that you find in the chocolate final product. So the short version of that story is we still don't know where this comes from.
So it's primarily in the husk, but not really in the bean.
Initially,
as we pull this cocoa bean off the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And then somewhere along there, the cocoa bean needs to get processed.
It could be in transport, in processing of the chocolate. We don't know. That they couldn't nail it down.
A lot of these companies get their chocolate not in the form of cocoa beans, though, do they? A lot of the processing occurs at the plantation.
No, they trade in the bean, or they trade in either the whole bean, or they might get the ground product. There's very different forms of the commodity that they get. So there's various different ways that it could be contaminated. In Nigeria, they still, this particular study that I looked at, where they were trying to figure out where the lead's coming from. At the time the study was produced, they were still using lead in their petrol in Nigeria, so they considered that to be a potential source. As I said, it was inconsistent. They couldn't say yes or no.
Yep.
So we don't know where it's coming from. But what's happened with the levels is that up until recently, we had an idea of what we thought was acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
The scientific data indicated that a particular level of lead was acceptable. You were unlikely to see symptoms of lead poisoning by consuming this particular level. But there has been more research done in the last couple of decades, and that has actually indicated a much lower level than we previously thought to be acceptable. And slowly different regulatory groups are starting to reduce the amount of lead that they're allowing into their products. So the European Food Safety Authority has actually introduced a lead level. They didn't actually have a lead level in food, specifically for food that they had, but they've recently introduced an acceptable lead level in foods and cadmium.
Yep.
And those guidelines are to be put into practice by 2019. However, a few years ago, many years ago, so California have implemented what they call Proposition 65. And what that does is they've decided that anything that has a lifetime risk increase of any form of cancer by 0.001% has to be labeled as potentially carcinogenic.
Yep.
Now, the lead levels which are in some of these chocolates exceed the dosage level which would give that, because we found that lead can cause cancer when you're exposed to a certain level. It actually varies. So, unfortunately, children are more susceptible to lead. So adults will absorb 11% of lead that they consume. Children will absorb between 30 to 70% of the lead that they consume. And children love chocolate.
They do. They also have no control mechanism.
And they're smaller. So if I was to eat a chocolate bar, my body mass would absorb a certain amount of chocolate. A child has a smaller body mass, so that lead which is in that chocolate would be more concentrated. So children are definitely a concern, and you look at the way that these factors they compound in various ways. One of the effects of lead poisoning is neurological development deficiencies, and even that is a lot lower level than we previously thought. We've discovered that, and lead actually has a short biological half-life in blood. It's 15 days for it to actually be flushed out of your blood, whereas it can be more like 40 years for it to get out of your bones.
Wow. And
you consider a child is growing, they're putting bone mass on.
Yeah.
So that lead will actually
stay in them.
It'll stay in them for longer.
Yeah.
So this is all doom and gloom. Now, there is some perspective that we need to consider, though, through all of this. It's good information to have. It's not as bad as what it sounds, but it's certainly information that I think should be out there. As you said, chocolate is not a necessary part of our lives.
No.
We don't need
Some
chocolate.
people it is.
Some people consider it to be necessary.
So I guess the question is, how much is safe?
That varies, depending on who you are. But we're looking at about 3.5 micrograms of lead a day.
Is the toxic level?
Is what you want to limit to children.
Yep.
Now, some of these chocolate bars would have more than that. You give them one chocolate bar, they've exceeded their acceptable daily dose of lead.
Yep.
However, you have to consider, do you want to give your child lots of chocolate every day? And but I'm serious though. It's not something that with the research that I've done here, I would say it's okay if you're eating chocolate once in a while, it's fine. An adult can eat chocolate daily and not get a level which is high, what is recommended.
On average, how much lead is in a standard chocolate bar?
If you look at the website that published this, they're not actually saying what levels of lead and cadmium are in the chocolates, which I found a little bit suspicious, actually, initially when I was looking at it, because I would like to see that data. What they claim is that they're working with the manufacturers to get them to label the chocolate bars for California. But we're talking, particularly with cancer, and like cancer is a word that scares everybody. And you're talking a 0.001% increase in the lifetime likelihood of developing renal cancer. Now,
on top of the existing?
On top of the existing, which is total lifetime risk of 1% developing renal cancer.
Right. So instead of 1% chance, if you decide to eat chocolate, you'd get 1.001%.
Yeah. And that compares to a lifetime likelihood of developing any form of cancer of 50%.
Seems pretty insignificant.
It is. I mean, it'll definitely make me rethink how much chocolate I eat. And the other thing is that it is considered a factor, even at low levels, of chronic kidney disease. And it turns out that if you look at number of people in America who are suffering from chronic kidney disease, 30 million people are suffering from chronic kidney disease and require treatment.
That's more than the population of Australia.
It is, and the population of America is only something like 320 million. So roughly 1 in 10 Americans suffer from chronic kidney disease. And chronic lead poisoning is considered a factor in chronic kidney disease. So I have a study here where they're looking at lead levels in different chocolates, and we're sort of seeing range of lead from about 1.19 to 2 micrograms per gram of lead. So you want to limit your...
That's in a bar. Or is that... Oh, that's per gram.
That's per gram.
So milk chocolate is around 1.5 and dark chocolate's around 1.8.
Yeah, so the level...
Milligrams of micrograms.
Micrograms of lead per gram of chocolate.
Right.
So, I mean, that's saying that if you give a child 10 grams of chocolate, you've definitely exceeded the acceptable daily intake of lead. I mean, I'm focusing mostly on lead here, but cadmium, it's a similar story, similar toxic effects with cadmium. There's also some reproductive effects with cadmium as well.
Yeah.
But in terms of ratio of acceptable levels, it's about the same. So that wouldn't be bad for an adult, but for a child, you wouldn't want to be exposed to that every day. Studies from 1985, though. So I have a study here from 2014 where they did ICP-MS studies on different brands of chocolate. So if we look at the lead levels, this is nanograms per gram. So we go from 86 nanograms per gram all the way up to 230 nanograms per gram of lead in chocolate.
It's gone down by an order of magnitude.
It has gone down because we've stopped using lead in pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And it varies more because these chocolates will come from different sources. So we're going to see different levels.
Very interesting study.
But what we've seen with these different levels, which are now considered acceptable, which is a lot lower than what we've accepted previously, the science is a lot more sensitive. We're picking up lower level effects here. So it's not that the chocolate's getting worse. The chocolate now is better than it was for you previously. The levels of heavy metals have actually gone down over the years, but the levels that we're willing to accept have gone down even further.
Yep.
When I read this article, I thought, and once I've done the study, I thought it was a little bit, the wording was a little bit harsh. It makes it sound like these companies are being negligent, when really it's just the information that we have on the toxicity of lead is being updated. And unfortunately, some of the products which we're used to consuming are now being revealed to have levels which are mildly toxic. So my personal opinion of this, it's not going to stop me from eating chocolate. And if I had kids, I would still give them chocolate occasionally.
So no childhood's ruined here?
No childhood's been ruined here, but I certainly would rethink how much chocolate I'm consuming and how much chocolate I would allow a child to consume, because clearly there is potential for some detrimental effects here, and it's just another thing to consider.
So in that website, they named and shamed a few brands, but from these scientific journals, it doesn't seem like there's much cause for why there is lead in the chocolates to begin with. So is it safe to assume that all brands of chocolate would contain levels of cadmium and lead?
Yes. Yeah, none of them will be free.
Brand is irrelevant.
Brand is irrelevant. They will all contain some levels of lead and cadmium. I would say, and just to make an assumption or to make an inference, I would be willing to bet that the difference between the chocolates that passed the levels and the chocolates which didn't pass the level would be rather small. We're dealing with very, very small levels here. This study from 2014 says that 1 cube of dark chocolate can contain up to 20% of the daily lead oral allowable limit for children.
But no kids like dark chocolate anyway. This article then goes on to say large quantities is preferable for children to eat in milk or white chocolates rather than dark chocolate.
Still, I mean, 20%, and it is a linear relationship. So dark chocolate is typically 70%, whereas milk chocolate would be between 40 and 60%. So you're still looking at maybe 10% of the daily lead oral limit. So you still don't want to give children too much chocolate.
Yep.
Keeping in mind, though, that these limits are based off the no observable effect limit. So you're still reducing the level. So the acceptable level is lower than the level which you're going to see effects from.
I thought you said lead has no threshold of acceptable low levels. Like some chemicals do, and the safe level is then set at 1/100th of that concentration.
There is a no observable effect limit for daily consumption of lead. However, it's complicated by the fact that lead is bioaccumulative.
Yeah.
It's not like a lot of other potentially toxic compounds like pesticides, which most pesticides are metabolized and excreted through the body. They have relatively short biological half-lives. So there's sort of a daily limit where if you're consuming that, you kind of reach this stage where you're flushing it out as much as you're consuming it. Whereas lead, because it's bioaccumulative, there is more of a long-term effect. So while there is a no observable effect limit, they basically like to say
It's
even
like a lifetime dose limit.
Yeah, there's a lifetime dose limit. So it's a little more complicated than compounds which have a shorter biological half-life and are excreted through the body easier.
This is kind of neat, though. There's a table that shows the number of chocolate cubes that needs to be consumed by a child to reach daily consumption limit of lead. And between 5 brands that they've tested, it's around 9 to 22 cubes of chocolate for a child.
Well, no kid's going to eat a whole...
22 blocks is a lot. 22 cubes.
Yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot of chocolate. That's a whole chocolate bar.
Yeah, and adults doesn't absorb as much lead, right? We absorb only 11%. So we can eat like 6 times more than them. That's a lot of chocolate.
It is, yeah. So this study, it turns out to be a little more complicated than I initially thought.
Yeah, it's interesting though.
But the conclusion which I drew from it is the chocolate is kind of it's a bit on the edge, and it definitely will make me rethink how much chocolate I'm consuming. But it's not going to make me panic. I'm not going to eat a chocolate bar and be in hospital for lead poisoning. And
I think having these numbers here and being able to calculate how much chocolate is actually the oral daily limit kind of brings it into perspective that, you know what, it's going to be okay to buy that 85% lead chocolate, dark chocolate.
I might take some of these tables out and put them on the website.
Yeah. Obviously,
I can't take the whole article because it's the paid article, but I'll take some of the information out and put it on the site just so that people can compare and look at it and sort of say this is what the latest research says. I mean, they're not brand specific. There's reasons why they're not. I mean, that could be a potential conflict of interest, and we don't want that, as I mentioned before. But it's handy information to have, I think, and particularly tabulated the way that it is.
Yeah, and milk chocolate doesn't absolve the sins either. There's still a significant proportion of lead content in milk chocolate. So if you want to enjoy dark chocolate, you don't have to avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news. It's fake. Phony. Fake. Fake news. Fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news. Very fake news.
Believe me.
Well, I have a quickie.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to do more of these, but just for now with the crash courses and that kind of thing, they take up a bit of time, so I don't really get so much time to do these sorts of things. But I've just got one little quickie.
Excuse me?
So this article popped up on my Facebook feed, so I just want to get your impressions of it when it wants to come up.
Mariah Carey records shock cover of dead Kennedy Nazi punks off in support of Antifa. What's an Antifa?
Anti-fascists.
Ah.
So all of these Nazi protests which are happening in America. So Mariah Carey has recorded a cover of a dead Kennedy's anti-Nazi song. So this kind of raised a little bit of suspicion.
Is this real?
Well, that's for you to decide. I kind of want to get your opinion on this. So I'll read through it. I'll just go up a little bit. So, born-again Christian pop singer and self-styled voice of MTV generation Mariah Carey has sent shockwaves through Tin Pan Alley in the announcement that she has recorded a cover of Dead Kennedys' Nazi Punks F*** Off to be released as a single and with the proceeds to be donated to US anti-fascist action group Antifa. The shock release is slated to be available as MP3 and FLAC downloads as well as CD single and a strictly limited edition vinyl double single red vinyl featuring bonus covers of California Uber Allies and Too Drunk to Fuck. A spokesman for Miss Carey confirmed that the singer, who is a descendant from immigrants of mixed African-American, Venezuelan and Irish descent, has been particularly affected by the coverage of the recent anti-white supremacist groups. What?
I thought they are white supremacists.
Oh, yeah, okay. A spokesman for Miss Carey confirmed that the singer, who is descended from immigrants of mixed African-American, Venezuelan, and Irish descent, has been particularly affected by coverage of the recent anti-white supremacist protests in Charlottesville and felt obliged to speak out. Mariah may be best known for producing some of the most dismally bland commercial music of the past 2 decades, for dating obscenely rich men, but she feels that it is time to make a break from the past and embark on a new stage in her career, he explained. The spokesman confirmed that the plans are far too advanced for Miss Carey to do a nationwide tour of a small club venues with a 4-piece rock backing band. We can't confirm the lineup yet, but East Bay Ray has said he's up for it, and Bob Mould is interested. So I can't read it from here.
This looks like an Onion website.
He also declined to confirm rumours that Miss Carey has recorded a version of Toy Dolls' take on the classic children's song Nellie the Elephant, noted for its raucous chorus of Trump, 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 to be released at the moment the already disgraced president is impeached. News of the shock release has been taken by many to confirm long-standing rumours that Carey has been secretly dating former Kennedy's frontman Eric Butcher, better known by his stage name Jello Biafra. Former singer turned spoken word artist and outspoken atheist represents a marked contrast to Miss Carey's previous paramours, who include former husbands, billionaire head of Sony Music, Tommy Mottola, and TV presenter and impresario Nick Cannon. Carey also dated Australian multi-billionaire and cricket fan James Packer. However, the pair famously broke off their engagement following a bitter argument over a contested LBW decision in the second test of the 2016 West Indies Tour of Australia. And that's where the article ends.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so there are a few clues in here. First of all,
when would she play in a 4-piece band in small clubs?
Well, for me, the first one is she's doing a cover. It also includes a cover of Too Drunk to F***. I mean, why would she do that? So next one that really stands out to me is she broke up with James Packer over a contested LBW decision in the West Indies cricket tour. I mean, that's ridiculous. So yeah, then you have a bit of a look around the site, and you look at some of the other stories which they've got. So Stephen Hawking hasn't got a leg to stand on, says Jeremy. Donald Trump to present Steve Bannon with participation medal for service. So yeah, it bit of a ring of a satire news site, which would make now the actual story itself kind of has enough of a ring of truth to it. But reading the full article, I kind of go, okay, this sounds a bit ridiculous. Then you look at the links and you go, no, this is clearly a satire site. What do you... Fat Boy Kim to re-release his mix of radioactivity is a photo of Kim Jong-un. So this is the stage where I'd say this is obviously a satire site, which any good satire site will have a disclaimer on it somewhere to say that it's a satire. Now, you've obviously been looking for it. You've been scrolling up and down. But actually, it is on this page.
It is?
Yeah, right down the bottom. You've got to look for it.
Have you ever had a discussion with someone where they sent you their point in an article, a news article that they read on Facebook, and it's from a satire website?
Oh, no. You know, I have, yes. I think it was on Twitter.
Oh, wow.
Oh, the About Us. Daily news satire and comment from something. I don't know. This has stopped. But right down the bottom.
Ah, yes.
About Us. Daily news satire and comment from the world's worst local newspaper. That's awesome. The world's worst local newspaper. It's there. It's like buried a bit.
Yep.
But there's enough clues in here.
It's quite hard to read some of these things because they just don't make sense.
It's very well done.
Yeah.
And look, they haven't really... Then they're not trying to deceive. It is clearly a satire site, but I think some people would be fooled. So that sound means we're going to hear some David Avocado Wolf.
Oh, yay.
I thought we should do some
What's
of
his
this.
propaganda of the week?
I thought we should do some of this regularly because he's a very special individual. Some very special views. There's actually a couple of reasons why I want to focus on David Wolf. He's rather insidious. Most of the videos you'll see from him on the internet are actually cutesy little videos. He takes viral videos and then he puts his little logo on them. I mean, you can find them anywhere else. If I see something on Facebook which has got his name on it and I want to share it, I'll find the original and share that. I want nothing to do with him. And this particular clip shows why. It's not his most crazy stuff, but by the time I finish playing this clip, you'll see exactly why he's not just a funny lunatic. He's actually a dangerous lunatic.
A lot of information to cover this morning. We're going to have more than the best time ever. Anybody enjoy their weekend here so far? Is it possible that we can have even more fun? Only all the time? Only again and again? Only forever? We are pretty much a vanguard organization here of people who really actually care about everything and put intention behind everything that we're doing. And I want to share with you today a little piece about this that some of you may be aware of. A good friend of mine came and saw me yesterday, and he had no idea about any of this stuff that I was really into. And so I don't really know, because stuff filters out there on the internet. Some stuff's out there on YouTube. Anybody ever seen YouTube? This is my favorite thing now. We were watching ghost videos on YouTube last night. There's some wild stuff on YouTube. But anyway, there's a lot of information that I'm putting out there. I'm not sure who's gotten what, because a lot of it I just give away for free. There's a document that's been running around the internet for free that talks about a very specific subject that we're going to touch on here, because this subject is kind of where we're all going, because most of us here want to live over 80? More! 100? 120? Look, people have made it to 100 on 60 cigarettes a day, on some kind of a thing of some kind of a fried animal muscle called meat. Never had a vegetable in 20, 30, 40 years. I think if they ate well. There's a few of you in this audience right now. You might make it to 200 if you had the right technology, if you had the right angle. Now, I use the word technology because it's a word we're all intimately aware of. And this idea is that, do you drive the same car you drove when you were 16? No. How many people here are still 16?
Waffles doesn't.
Why did you change it? It got old. Let's get on with the new. Something better came along. And that's kind of what's happening with this whole field of nutrition. We're kind of like, yeah, that's old news. We're on to the new thing. That's old news. I mean, I love lettuce. You know that. But it's kind of old news. We know that lettuce and celery are good. We know that oranges and apples are good. We know that parsley is good. We know that hemp seeds are good. But now we got to get on to where this is all going and kind of drive into a new territory. That's why we came to this event, because some of you already know that raw food is good for you. How many people are confused? How many people don't know that? Just totally confused, not sure if they should eat a tomato or cook it. You ever seen this? Like, what about, I read about lycopene. How many people have gotten this one before? Okay, check this out. You get 5 times as much lycopene if you cook the tomato, but you also get 5 times as much lycopene if you blend the tomato. And you know where that information comes from? Dr. Atkins' new diet revolution. He's out of court. He died of a heart attack. His heart, of course, his diet stops heart problems. That's the usual routine in the diet world. So you could just tell him, well, you know what? I read in Dr. Atkins' new diet revolution that all you have to do is blend tomatoes. You get 5 times as much lycopene, but you don't explode every plant cell because of the heat.
I just love how he's criticizing Atkins for his crackpot diet. And
what is he propagating, encouraging?
Well, he encourages raw food. He's sort of one of these raw food vegans.
Yeah.
But it's just, to me, it's confusing how he's talking about raw food and then he talks about how you should blend the tomatoes on, but that's what Atkins said, and he's full of bullshit. I was like, well, what are you saying? Because it almost sounds like he's saying that cooking the tomatoes better. I'm like, well, that's not raw food diet. But one thing I've noticed that he does is, I think his waffling is intentional, and I've noticed him watching a few other videos. He skips from one thing to another, and he says these things that come totally left of field. They just come out of nowhere. All of a sudden, we're talking about lettuce when we were talking about cars half a second ago. And I think he does this in order to confuse people. And I think he does that to confuse people, to throw off their guard, because they're trying to catch up. Their mind's trying to catch up. Hang on a second. We were talking about cars, now we're talking about lettuce. And that actually makes the mind more susceptible to receiving information. It's kind of a way of getting people to let their guard down.
Oh,
if you ever study hypnosis, it is actually a hypnotic technique.
Oh, is it? To skip from topic to topic.
Basically, the whole point is you surprise someone, and then while they're trying to catch up with this new information that they're faced with, you can they're more susceptible in those few microseconds. And I've noticed that he does that. He's constantly flitting from one thing to another, and I think that might be why he does it.
Intentional.
That's just a little angle you can use. We have discovered, actually, in our field, some pretty startling information. And, I'm kind of hardwired for medical research, really. Both my parents are medical doctors. They met in medical school.
I'm sure they're proud of you.
Is anybody aware of that? I was conceived in a medical school library. In the corner, there's one dark corner with, maybe one alternative health book they tried to hide. They turned it around, left it in a corner.
Don't get it.
The whole situation is so beyond ridiculous, it's hard to even fathom. I mean, this is the darkest age of medical quackery ever.
He's got a point there.
He is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No, it is the darkest age of medical quackery ever.
Propagated by people like him.
You know, doctors are like,
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
well, looks like we've picked up a small cancerous growth in your breast, and we're going to start you on chemo right away. And they give you the whole doomsday report. Now, due to the internet, we get online now. We go over here, we go, oh my God, I could smile. I could do yoga. I could have the best day ever. I could jump in a spring. I could actually get into a waterfall. I could go to Hawaii and breathe fresh air. I could have fun again. I could have joy in my heart. I could actually drink the best water ever. And look at this whole diet I could be on. Next day, back to the doctor's office. Yeah, we're going to get you on the chemotherapy, and we just need you to authorize this right here. We need you to authorize that right there. Here's your insurance papers. Please authorize that. Doc, before I do that, I just want to ask you a question. Do you think this has anything to do with my diet? No, no, no. This has nothing to do with diet. But here, eat these pills. Now they're bypassing the whole eating thing completely. They just inject it into people. What is it about doctors and
Now, I just want to stop that there. And this is what I'm talking about. Now, is it just me? I mean, am I just picking up this wrong, or did he just basically say, don't bother with chemo, go on a diet?
He kind of said, I grew up in a medical household because my parents are doctors. But doctors are crazy. And we live in the dark ages of information.
But did he just say, don't bother with your chemo?
In a very roundabout way, yes.
Well, he has to. Otherwise, he gets sued. It just seems to me like that's what he's saying, and he has been accused of saying that before.
Well, he's an anti-vax propaganda guru.
Yeah.
I'm just reading up on this guy.
Yeah. But the thing is that, okay, with diet, now everyone knows that eating a healthy diet can help prevent cancer.
Yep.
That is something which is fact. But, and I gave you this analogy before, it's like being in a car accident. You can be in a car accident and you can say to your doctor, well, what if I drive more carefully? What if I don't text on my phone and I wear a seatbelt? Well, that's great. That'll probably prevent you from getting into another accident. But right now, we need to fix your face. You need a facial reconstruction. Driving better and wearing a seatbelt isn't going to put your face back together. Right now, you need urgent medical attention now. You need surgery, you need this, you need that. That needs to happen now. If after this you want to go off and drive carefully, not text on your phone and wear a seatbelt, then great. We probably will never see you here again. I hope to never see you again. But it's not going to fix the problem that's already there. And the same with cancer. Yes, eating a healthy diet can help to prevent cancer, but it's not going to cure cancer. It's a preventative step. Once you've got the cancer, it's too late. We're past that stage now.
Yeah.
But to say to someone, don't bother with all this chemo stuff. Go and live your life and eat healthy and eat this anti-cancer diet. No. You are literally killing people. You're dumbstruck.
I am. I see on Facebook he has 11 million followers.
Some of those people are just there to keep an eye on him, and I'm sure that all of these science watchers are watching him as well.
He believes the Earth is flat.
He does, yeah. I actually have. I've got plenty of videos of his to watch, and that is one of them. That he believes the Earth is flat. As I said, you could. People sort of say, well, why not just let him be? It's not hurting anyone. Yes, he is. When he's telling people not to take their chemotherapy. And look, chemotherapy sucks. It really sucks. It's not nice. And if you say to a person, you don't have to take this stuff that'll make you vomit every day and make your hair fall out and make you feel like total shit. Just, here, eat this apple. You'll be fine. there's a bias there because you're saying to a person, you don't need to go through this hell. You just need to eat right and you'll be fine. Go out and enjoy life and have a great time.
And just believe.
The better time you have, the more likely you are to be cured. They recently did a study on alternative medicines and cancer treatment. Now, for obvious reasons, or reasons that I hope are obvious, they couldn't actually get ethics approval to say, you're not going to take this cancer treatment. But they took in people who had cancer and were refusing conventional treatment.
Yep.
And then they matched them up to people who were in similar situations. So it wasn't a totally random study. It couldn't be.
Yeah.
They were selecting
Choice.
cancer patients who were very similar to these people that had volunteered to be parts of the study who were on alternative medicines. And, the people who were going through the alternative medicines had a higher mortality rate, with one exception.
Yeah.
Prostate cancer. But they concluded in the study, or suggested in the study, that the reason for that possibly could have been because prostate cancer is so slow acting. That the study didn't go long enough to be able to see the difference, but they suspect that given long enough, they would see the same sorts of results.
Well, given long enough, if men live long enough, most men do develop prostate cancer. And a lot of men die with prostate cancer than from prostate cancer, meaning they don't even know that they had it to begin with. It's
it's not a very aggressive form of cancer.
No.
And some of these people did attempt to go and get conventional medicine, but once cancer progresses to a certain stage, there's nothing you can do about it. If you eschew modern medicine up to a point where you've got metastatic cancer, and if that has spread to your lymph nodes or your liver or your bones, that's not something that you can recover from, even with the best treatment that we have available today. You need to get onto it early. And the longer you leave it, the more aggressive your treatment regime has to be, and the worse you're going to suffer. Oh, and the thing about the intravenous, doctors don't like giving needles as much as people don't like getting them. But there are some products that you can't take orally.
No.
Particularly high molecular weight compounds aren't absorbed very well by the gut. There's some compounds that are unstable in stomach acid. You have to take them intravenously because otherwise they won't get into your bloodstream. I'm sure most chemo drugs, if you drank them, probably would suffer from severe ulcers.
Gut damage.
That wouldn't be very nice.
No. Given that your gut lining actually gets removed during chemotherapy. Chemotherapy attacks proliferating cells rapidly.
It does too, yeah.
Rapidly turnover cells. So things like your hair and your gut lining turns over regularly, and as well as cancer. So because they're trying to get rid of cells that are rapidly growing and intervene in that process, you lose your gut lining, hence you can't absorb anything.
And that's why people lose weight.
Yeah.
They have to inject people with something. It's kind of an archetype. I was freaked out by needles and all that stuff when I was a kid because I was around it. I grew up. I went with my dad on house calls all the time. I did that for years. Like my mom would be doing her thing, and my dad would be like, "Okay, you got to come with me," and we go on house calls together. So we'd see Mrs. Smith year 1, year 5, year 8, and that's why I'm a raw foodist today. Somewhere in my genetics, I'm hardwired for medical research. So what I'm going to kind of throw in here today is this whole discovery that happened about 25 years ago. And it goes right to the root of everything that we've been talking about all weekend, and that is you don't ask a fish about water. Why? It's right there. You can't see it. Right. The whole assumption of cooking. Why didn't we question that assumption? It's just too close. It's just too close. Couldn't see. It's right there. And that all the significant scientific breakthroughs will come in that way in the future. That we became so technologically advanced that Sir Isaac Newton, Pythagoras, the greatest engineers, Archimedes, and every single Greek super philosopher could not figure out how that pyramid was built. Not even close, not to get to even base 1.
So we're talking about pyramids all of a sudden. I would love if anyone
Archimedes is not an engineer.
if anyone within earshot of this podcast knows anything about hypnosis and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, please get in contact with me and tell me what you think of this. I would love to hear your impression. Someone with a psychology degree that knows NLP, I suspect that that's what he's doing, and why some of the stuff that he says is just comes from nowhere.
But here's some retired Flint, Michigan construction worker figures it out. That's the kind of world we live in because it's so obvious we can't see it. Well, this is one of those. And it's one of those, I think, that once you hear this and you turn it over and you start looking for it and you start seeing it out there, it will just resonate. Well, and it actually eventually you'll go, okay, we're changing the road. We're going this way now. Because what's been discovered is that chief recycling organism of all mammals, reptiles, amphibians, birds has been discovered. When I was about 14 years old, I remember reading a science article. I grew up very scientifically minded. Everything was about science, read this, that, the other thing. That's why I don't believe in that stuff anymore. And it said this, that there was evidence of arthritis in dinosaur bones. Fossilized dinosaur bones, evidence of arthritis. And I thought, even then, as a young kid, I knew it was the food. I think intuitively I was like, no, dinosaurs aren't eating junk food. They're, human diseases are caused by the food that people eat. I mean, I think as a young kid I even knew that.
It must be because dinosaurs are cooking their foods.
It's the trans fats. They're using low smoke point oils and they're getting trans fats in their food.
The dinosaurs' food.
Yes.
They weren't eating raw foods.
No. They weren't eating. What is this guy on? I've been making accusations that he's doing this intentionally, but maybe he's just nuts.
Oh, God.
I think he's too rich to be crazy, though.
I don't know. He's obviously getting paid for the things that he supports. Like, he's a spokesperson for NutriBullet.
I will never buy one of those.
You better not.
And I remember thinking that thought. I also remember thinking one time after eating chicken that I'd been poisoned.
I think he's been poisoned.
You probably thought that
Salmonella.
too. Anyway, so I thought, my God, this is really interesting. Here's what happened.
Syphilis.
Over a period of years, I always had an ear for that. What is it that actually takes out a wild turtle that can live to be 300? What will finally get it out of there? What about an eagle that can live to be over 100? What finally takes it out? What really gets people in the end? And if you've ever studied heart disease, has anybody ever seen a Diet for All Reasons, Dr. Clapper's video where they open up the heart artery and all that like milky pus that looks like a McDonald's milkshake comes out?
That's a multi-part video, so that one's to be continued. I'm not sure if I want to.
So is the anti-calcium?
I'll watch the rest of it and I'll let you know.
All right.
We might finish this at a later date, or I might go on to another video. We'll see how crazy it gets.
I have a feeling he's going to be a recurring theme.
Oh, he will be. He will be, and then it'll be someone else. We'll find someone else to. There'll be plenty. He's a usual suspect. He'll be one of many.
He's very famous.
But most of it is because of those cutesy videos that he puts up.
What, little puppies?
All the little puppies and, this, that, and then these inspirational
quotes,
memes and quotes. Respect your inner quantum being or something like that. Some kind of crap. He does the quantum stuff.
Oh, does he?
Oh, he does, yeah. So if you like what we do here and would like to see more of it, then get onto our become a patron at patreon.com/thebunk and make a pledge to give a donation every time we release an episode. Or if you would prefer, you can give a one-off donation at our website if you would click on the PayPal button up the top of the website. And also, if you could give us a review on iTunes or Stitcher, that would be great. And keep an eye out. If you find anything that you think needs to be looked at, get onto our website. There's a section there for contact us, and you can make submissions for things that you think should be a story. And we are going to end this and get out of here.
See you later.
We're armed. Armed and ready.
We're on?
We're on. We're recording. Oh, get rid of Kirk Cameron. I don't want to see his freaking ugly face.
Nope. I want to see my brief sheet.
If you like what we're doing here and would like to see more of it and done a little bit better and with more resources and better coffee, become a patron. Lucy's just banging into a microphone there. It's all right, I can cut that out in post. Bang.
That would pick that up, would it?
I hope it does. No, it won't. That's why I chose these microphones, because they're very good at background. I actually have a condenser microphone, which is better quality microphone, but it's also.
Do you use these for music as well?
Yeah, these are instrumental mics. They use these to record guitars, and the covers are separate. You know how I put that little bit when I last week where I said that I cut in because I felt like I'd accidentally implicated that researcher.
Not really. I listened to the thing and I was like, that research wasn't really implicated in that article bashing.
So,
because his research was on algae life.
But I was at the library. I was using a different microphone, but it's very, very similar to these. It should sound the same technically. But I was at the library and I was in one of the study rooms, and they're very echoey. And even with the dynamic microphones, I couldn't get the background rejection. So I recorded that while underneath my jacket.
Really?
I was lying down on a table, covered underneath my jacket.
You brought this there?
No, it was my sound card, a cable, and an SM58 microphone. It's very similar to these, but it's more designed for the
portable stuff.
The SM58s are vocal microphones, and these are instrumental. But if you buy the shroud which goes around it, they're actually better for this kind of stuff because they block out the plosives better if you set them up properly. Mm-hmm. But that's why that sounded so different, because I was actually lying down on a table in the library underneath a leather jacket.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes, this is showbiz.